So I've been around a very, very long time. I won't say how many decades. I've been in the nonprofit sector really my whole career and have the privilege of having all the different positions almost in experiencing how to build those relationships and work with donors. And I have so much respect and care for all that you all are doing every day. It's a really challenging job. I live in Asheville, North Carolina, and love my horse and my dog, and love all the nature and hiking and kayaking and fun here. So excited to have Jarrod with us because he is going to make it real and bring you all some great examples and stories. He is a star in the fundraising sector, and we're so excited to have him. So take it away, Jarrod.
Well, hello, everyone. Good morning or good afternoon or good night, depending where you are across the world. Again, my name is Jarrod Williams. I'm the Director of Development and External Relations for the Urban League of Greater Pittsburgh. I am so excited to be with you all today. I've been in the fundraising space for the last 6-7 years. Have worked in different areas of fundraising as far as data management, annual fund, major gifts, which we're going to talk a little bit about today, and currently leading our development and marketing team here at the Urban League. I'm proud to say I'm one of 65 African American males that holds the CFRE credential, so that is the Certified Fundraising Executive credential. Extremely proud of that, and particularly with yesterday being Juneteenth. So proud of my African heritage, and I can have the ability to continue legacies. So also too, very involved with a national organization and group called Men of Color in Development. We do meet monthly, so if there's anyone that is interested in joining our group, it is a group of African American males, and we just dialogue and connect as fundraising professionals. Please be sure to let me know because we're always looking for new members.
Thank you. I thought that 65 for a minute there. I'm like, you're not 65. I'm like,
I'm
wow, one of
55.
65.
I'm 55, so that's why 55.
Oh, welcome. So now before we get started on today's topic, I just wanted to share a bit about who we are at Veritus. Some of you on the call may be very familiar with us, but those of you who aren't, we're passionately relationship focused and grounded in a data-driven approach. This dynamic is critical to the system, structure, and strategy that we have found to be successful in mid-major in-plan giving programs. And we have a vision to help nonprofits of all sizes create a culture and approach to fundraising that will help you create transformational relationships with your donors. So we accomplish this vision through a focused strategy and approach. Over the years, we've worked with thousands of nonprofits through our consulting work and online academy. And we've analyzed millions of donor records. We've been busy, Jarrod. This has framed our strategy and helped us identify the key pillars to success, including creating buy-in across your organization, a focus on donor and value attrition, improving revenue per donor, increasing net revenue to your programs, and being committed to meaningful relationships with your donors. And the beautiful thing is we've gotten to work with so many pretty phenomenal organizations, and we've partnered with them to create more transformational relationships with your donors. So what we do is truly from experience working alongside fundraisers day in and day out, and we've learned so much working alongside you, so thank you. So the agenda today, we're going to learn how to use the permission-based asking to learn valuable information about your donor. Like we talk a lot in fundraising about how to build relationships, but it's like, but really, how do you do that? What's that look like? We're going to try to break that down and make it as real as possible and walk through real life scenarios to see how you can craft those impactful questions, allow you to pivot and respond and be in those real authentic conversations.
So important. Yep.
Okay, so we're going to jump into the permission-based asking. So Jarrod, talk just a little bit about how you got exposed to this and how you started with this. Anything you want to tell us about it?
Sure. So previous to my current role here at the Urban League, I was a major gifts officer for the Dayton Performing Arts Alliance. That was a major arts organization back in my hometown of Dayton, Ohio. And if you know, unfortunately, when it comes to smaller or mid-sized nonprofits, it's normally challenging to do major gifts work, whether it's staffing issues, whether it's capacity issues, whatever have you. So unfortunately, for the DPAA is that they do not have a history of doing major gifts work. So I was assigned a Veritus coach who I love to this day and still talk to. And we began to use the Veritus way and the approach when we talk about qualifying donors. And it's extremely important process to know. And telling you why and understanding why the Veritas way works is important as well when we talk about permission-based asking. Because what it does, it builds trust with your donors, right? And allows donors to be in the driver's seat as well with you. And that's extremely important. I think that there are some fundamental things that we tend to forget when we talk about raising money, right? And being major gifts officers, is that just like any other relationship in our lives, it's truly based off of trust. I know it can get hard to kind of really think about that and get outside of that, but fundamentally it is. And particularly when you're in the beginning stages of introducing yourself or really creating a relationship with the donor, you really want to be have the ability to do that. And again, with permission-based asking, it really makes it a partnership. And we're going to talk about partnership later on today. But the Veritas way is key, and your ability to ask those open-ended questions really creates that joint unity when it comes to you being a fundraiser and when it comes to your donor.
And being a human. This is helpful in all relationships, right?
Yes. And try this too. I encourage people to really try this in their personal lives, right? Try to ask people open-ended questions all the time because it shows that you're curious. And curiosity too also too promotes safety, right? It makes people feel, like you're truly interested and you're warm and you're receiving. And those are the type of things that make such of a difference. Again, you got to remember, you're here to do a job, but being authentic in your relationship building is completely foolproof.
Awesome. Thank you.
Could I just interrupt really quickly? If you both could just scooch a little closer to your mics. There are a few people that are having a little bit trouble hearing.
All right. Is that any better, you think, Rebecca?
I think so.
Is that better?
Yep. And then if you'll both just speak up a little bit, and then I think we'll be good. And then again, you do have the option to turn on closed captions or another captions option in the webinar if that is easier for you.
All righty, let's bring it up a notch, Jarrod. Well, let's talk about the model just for a minute. And before I jump in, I want to say the main goal today for you all is that you take away some specific language or a tip or a tool. And if you're interested in learning more about how to really use the whole model, come back. We've got a lot of opportunities to really dive in. But any pieces and parts will help you. So let me just break it down sort of how it works. So you start with the connect, where you're getting to know, chatting, small talk. And then every black arrow is a yes/no question to help you move the conversation forward. And then you always end with celebrate, which is either a story of impact from the donor's giving. Jarrod will share some cool examples of how he does that, even just really appreciating them and who they are. And then the center is this circular, which I love because conversations are not linear. It's not like, well, we're going to do 5 steps and they're going to cooperate and think what I'm thinking and be in line with where I am. No, it's more about how do I come into that with great questions and take people on a journey. We may have to go back around the circle more than once to get to a place where we're clear on next steps and where folks are. So it gives you more flexibility being circular. And then there's 2 roles you play. And in the first meeting, I'll give you an example in a minute of how you even explain to a donor the first time you're meeting with them that you are playing 2 roles and you're asking permission to do that, which gives you, it's so exciting that it gives you permission to facilitate the meeting, which means you're going to be in charge of keeping it moving with permission, which then really helps with all of those awkward moments of, I feel like we're really having a good conversation here. Is it okay if I move forward? Are they going to think I'm not listening? So if you've asked permission and to be a facilitator, that helps. And then the partner is, I want to know where you are, what you're thinking, what doesn't make sense to you. This is a 2-way conversation, and it's important for me, to really hear from you. So they feel like this is not you coming with a presentation from your organization. This is a conversation. Jarrod, what other thoughts that that you think about or say in relation to this?
Yeah, I think the key here too is also clarity. I think that anytime you interact with your donors in the beginning, during middle, end, is that you always want to be steering and driving the conversation. So that's preempting them about exactly what conversation is going to happen. When I sit down with donors and say, I completely outline what we're going to talk about today. Because what happens is that a lot of donors are always scared because they're thinking that someone is going to make an ask to them, not
Mm-hmm.
necessarily ready for it, right? So you want to make sure that you're always upfront about what the conversation is going to be about, and also to carving out what next steps look like. I always make sure that you provide a clear next step with your donor, right? Because that creates that partnership. You're doing it together. You're giving them permission to, right? So you want to make sure that you want to provide next steps all through any type of interaction or any type of conversations with donors, particularly if you're teeing them up for a major gift, or asking maybe your donor to join your board, or any type of kind of big requirement or ask you're going to make of your donor. You want to make sure that you have those clear next steps, and you're being very, very clear, because again, we're looking to build trust here. All right. And honesty and being authentic is a big driver of that. So I could not agree with you more. Absolutely.
I love that. So if I'm your donor, number one, I know if you're going to ask me for money, you're going to tell me you're going to ask me for money.
Yeah.
So I can relax in a meeting. You're going to manage it. You're going to keep it going. You're going to be clear about the outcomes. So I don't feel like you're wasting my time. And
Yeah.
I can lower my stress, not like, okay, when is he going to ask? When's that going to happen? So that in itself really shifts, the experience for the donor.
It does, and donors definitely are always assessing us too as well. While we are practicing having healthy relationships with them, normally that, they're always kind of looking at the way that you're handling conversations and kind of really moving them through the process. Mm-hmm.
All right, so we start with the connect. We're like, Jarrod, how was Juneteenth yesterday? What did you do on your holiday? How is it meaningful to you? We have a little chit chat about, whatever little tidbits of information about this person, how are the grandkids, that sort of typical, get everybody in the room and settled. And what's helpful is sometimes that can get going quickly. So you want to make sure you're ready to transition. So that first arrow would be something like, are you ready to get started? Right? Something simple. I know you have a full day, you're ready to get started. And Jarrod, you can always jump in with what your language is on any of these.
Mm-hmm. And that's the case too as well. I think that people, are busy and they kind of want to be able to move along. But again, this is a great place where you want to set that clarity too, though, as well, right? In this moment now, you can say, hey, today what I would like to discuss with you is XYZ. I would like to get your thoughts. And after we're finished here, I would love to maybe schedule some more time with you to further discuss, right? That's a perfect example of kind of getting the meeting and getting the conversation started, without a manner of being too direct, right, as well. So again, that's the beautiful thing about it. Setting up the clarity, outlining, and creating those next steps. Yep, I agree with you, Karen.
So on the align, you're doing what Jarrod just said. Go on to the next slide if you don't mind, Caitlin. You're aligning to the reason you're there. You're aligning to, are you still available for until this time? And you're checking in on the role. So today, are you okay if I keep it moving and facilitate? And I just want you to know that you're my I see you as my partner in this, and I really want to hear your feedback. Does that work for you? And so now they know, okay, this is what we're about. They're not going to waste my time. They know how much time I have, and then you can get started and really dive into the meat of the meeting. So in each of the black arrows, we have an opportunity for that yes/no question. Now, you may not always ask the question before you go to the next circle every single time, but it's really helpful to have that ready and we're going to have you practice developing these in your own language, right? So that you can really help make those transitions. So for example, this would be one, I was touched to hear your story, being the first person in your family to go to college and how it inspired you to give. Would you mind me asking you a few more questions about that? So you've asked permission to dive into learning more about their passion and their story. And then in the be curious, just go to the next slide, Caitlin. This is where you're having, that should be the biggest circle, on the chart. Should be a really big circle. This is where the relationship building, the open-ended questions is happening. And you think about, a lot of times we may ask a question like, tell me about your passion for our mission. And they may tell a little bit, but the real opportunity is learning to be listening for those key pieces that you might want to learn more about, or you could ask them to share more about. Or you said this, I'd love to hear more about what that meant for you. So it's not just ask a question, listen, ask a question, listen. It's ask a question and allow them to share, and then be asking deep questions that help you go deeper in the conversation if they seems like they're comfortable with that in the moment. So, and then go back just a second, Caitlin. Then you're going back with, oh, you talked about this. Would you mind if I share some experience, that's the content, or share a story, or share a little bit about this program? And then you share a little bit, and then they're asking questions. So it's not a presentation, it's this real experiential piece. So Jarrod, talk a little bit about this, because this is really the magic.
Yeah, and it proves that you're listening, and it proves that you're actively listening. And again, what happens if you look at the model, it's circular for a reason. Because if you're listening, sometimes the model will take you through different places. Mm-hmm. And I think that's an example of being donor-centered, right, and relationship-centered, which is a big piece in the Veritus way. Allowing the donor to kind of really drive exactly what happens. But it's important that you have the agility and the listening abilities to go there. So phrases I like to use is, that sounded important to you. Could you tell me more about that? Or if you're about to make an ask, is there anything today that will prevent you from not being a part of something special that we're trying to do here? So it's all type of phrases that I think that you can use. But the powerful thing about it is that you have to kind of recall based off the information that your donor is telling you. And I love somebody just said a key phrase in the chat when we talk about emotional intelligence. This is all centered around emotional intelligence. So yes, that's great. You have to have the ability and the agility to be able to naturally sense where a donor is. And listening is the key to that, Karen. I couldn't agree with you more.
Thank you, Jarrod. Yeah, the emotional intelligence is interesting. You may have moments when donor gets quiet, and you just need to give them a little space. And that's when we talk in other trainings, we talk about how we don't then go into a busy fight, flight, talking too much, trying to figure out what's going on. I think, Jarrod, you have the best energy. Like, I would want to talk to you all day because you're very calm, you're very present, you're very centered, you're very kind. And so that would help me be in a space, because some of the stuff might be emotional for donors that they're sharing about their passion or their history or their story. So just allowing space and tuning into their rhythm. If they're a fast talker, you may want to move a little faster. If they're slow, you might want to slow down, just sort of be kind of more on their wavelength. So the interesting thing is, we even do a yes/no question if they're ready for the ask, whether that's an ask for a gift or ask to come to an event or whatever that might be. So it could sound like this. Share with me your passion for kids to get a preschool education. We've talked about some of our preschool expansion plans. Are you ready to talk about how you could fulfill that interest? So this is a great way for them to say, oh, well, I'd love to hear more about that piece. I wasn't quite clear on it before we talk about, what the gift might be. And it's so respectful, because now they know, okay, now the thing's coming. And they can be in the right mental space. And then you don't have to, I don't know, Jarrod, that you've probably experienced this, where you're in conversation, you're having good conversation about the program. You're like, is this enough before I ask for the gift? Does this feel like we've really had like a good amount of discussion? So this just checks in and asks them if that's where they are.
Yeah, and I think you always want to, again, be centered enough to watch your anxiety when you're making an ask too. I'm pretty sure we got folks on the call that's ranging from folks that's just now starting in fundraising to folks that's been doing it for 20, 30 years. So you always kind of have to kind of master those feelings as well. And be able to listen to that too, because sometimes if you're a little too nervous or a little too anxious, you may not have a relationship with the donor that you may think you have, right? Because it shouldn't be like that, right? If we know that we've done a lot of cultivation work before to get to this point, it kind of should be expected. it should be comfortable and it should be kind of free flowing, right? So that's something to kind of look out for too, I think, as you have conversations with donors.
All right. So now we go into that ask, which is what, all of us in fundraising have been taught. Would you consider a gift of XYZ for the preschool program? And then be quiet. And the be quiet is not whoever speaks first loses or any of that sort of how do I win and get the yes. To me, the be quiet is just give people space to think and process. They may have to think, okay, wow, that's maybe more than I thought. That's pretty cool. Where could I get that from? They're processing all of that in their heads and giving them some space to process that.
And don't be afraid to follow up either. Sometimes you may not necessarily get an answer right then and there. There may be additional conversations that need to happen with, someone's spouse or somebody's partner or just some type of other thing that has to happen, right, in order for it to happen later on down the road, and that's okay. That's okay. You don't want to put too much pressure on anybody.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so then in this scenario we've created, the person's like, yes, I will do that. And then you ask permission to check in about logistics because you obviously voice a lot of appreciation. And then you go back to the align again, which is your opportunity. Like, okay, that's so exciting. You are being so generous. Does it work to do XYZ? Is this the right timing? When do I follow up? So in the next align, you can go ahead and move the slide, Caitlin. That's where in this align, you're aligning on next steps from the meeting, right? You're checking in, making sure you're clear or let's say they say maybe or no, you want to always have a next step. So this is a great place to also kind of go back to maybe some be curious questions and then ask permission for a next step. Align on those. So you can go back around and that really helps you. And then Caitlin just put the last little arrow, which is before we wrap up. Can I share a little story with you and celebrate the impact you've made? So go ahead and hit that one and take us to celebrate, Caitlin. And typically, there's two different ways you can do this. Jarrod, why don't you share what you tend to celebrate with donors, and then I'll share another idea.
Yeah, I think people normally, when they think about celebrate, they normally celebrate what the organization is actually going to accomplish with the gift, which is great too. But you also too can be very, very donor centered and celebrate the donor, right? And say, this is happening because of you, right? Thank you for meeting with us. Thank you for being so involved with us. Thank you for spreading, the word about our good work. There's different ways you can also celebrate not only what the work of the organization is doing, but making the donor feel good too as well. So you can go for a 2-for-1 here is what I call it. I like
2-for-1s. 2-for-1s. Yeah, I love the story. One of the fundraisers we work with went into a meeting. They had a donor that had given, I think, 15,000 every year for a number of years. Like, I think they're interested in this program. I'm going to ask for 25. And they came into the meeting and they had the conversation, made the ask, and the donor shared, I'm so sorry, but our business is struggling this year. And we really can't do more than the 15 we've always done. Or actually, I think they were doing less. We can only do 10 this year. And so here they were coming in to ask for 25. They said they can only do 10. And so it's so great to have that celebration language ready, because when that donor came back the next day and said, I was so nervous I felt badly to come and say I had to give less. I was disappointed, but you made me feel so valued and so appreciated. And as soon as we're doing better, you're going to be number one on my list of organizations I give to. So it helps you too as a fundraiser, because you got to check where your spirit goes there in a minute, because you have a goal. But really the goal is it's about the relationship, not the money. So your goal is the relationship. So showing compassion, empathy, and then celebrating them is a beautiful way for them to feel like, yeah, I'm still in the family. You still care about me. We're still cool. And, they feel good about who they are and they want to come back and do more. Okay. So now that we've gotten a baseline in permission-based asking, I want to talk through some key principles around asking good questions that you'll see in action when we go through a few scenarios in a moment. So I want you each to think about a time when you were in a conversation where you left feeling heard, valued, and interesting. Ooh, I love it when I feel interesting. Now think back to that conversation. I bet that the person asked thoughtful questions in a kind and natural way that allowed you to share in maybe a more honest and vulnerable way than you thought normally. So when done well, asking questions can be an incredibly honoring and engaging experience. It can also veer into feeling like an interrogation. So it's incredibly important to engage your emotional intelligence and be thoughtful in how you approach donor conversations. I remember having a conversation with a guy that felt like an interrogation because he asked a lot of yes/no questions because he was trying to take me down a certain path. I was actually interviewing him for a job. It was kind of interesting. And I got so irritated because I'm like, no, I'm not going to answer yes, no questions so that you can get me somewhere to get me to say or believe or think something. So that is not the yes, no are to help move the conversations along, but really it's the open-ended questions that build that relationship.
And I think the preparation piece is really important too. I think that every time you meet with a donor, you should have in mind exactly what do you want to accomplish, right? And I think if you just have a goal in mind, you can kind of create the multiple different avenues it takes to really get there, right? Because there's more than one question, there's more than one way, there's more than one kind of anything. But I think that when you're clear of understanding about exactly what you want to accomplish, exactly what you want to do, that can help, I think, significantly with that.
So, Jarrod, would you mind giving an example, putting you on the spot here of like you're looking at a donor's record and you're deciding what it is, what your next step is? What would be some examples of what some of those next steps might be that you're processing?
Yeah, so I think some goals that I kind of have set for donors, of course, one, I want to try to maybe get a gift. One, I think two is that I want to understand why this individual is interested in our organization. I think that's a goal. I think another goal is, can this individual connect me to other people that they think could be interested in the work that we're doing here? Um, and I think another goal too is understanding what else is possible with this donor. So I think you can outline several different things, and really kind of depending on the conversation, um, you can really accomplish those things. But being versatile and I think being prepared is important too. And these open-ended questions that we're talking about can help you get closer there to that particular kind of goal per se.
So I love what you're saying. It's like, let me have a goal in mind and then have a number of relevant questions, right, that help me move down that path because they may be useful in that conversation or not, depending on where it goes, right? And that means you need to put that work in ahead of time and consider where their hearts are, who they are as humans, where you are in the process. And then you want to ask any questions from a place of authenticity and not have ulterior motives. So that's kind of interesting, right? Because we're here. I mean, our job is to be the bridge between the donor's passions and interest and the mission. And they're making a difference in the world and changing the world and things that break their hearts through giving. And so we're really there to serve the mission and the people the organization's serving, and also connect the donor, create that community of everyone benefiting. Because the donor's benefiting too, from the sense of being able to help change the world. So yeah, it's a beautiful way to think about preparing and being a part of that. So then as you think through crafting good questions to ask your donors, here are a few tips. As I shared in the last slide, you need to do your research. So the questions are relevant. Taking that step further, you should look into the information and see where the holes are. Maybe the donor is passionate about research and rare childhood diseases, but you don't know the driver behind that passion. That's where you can focus your questions. You should spend some time crafting language that feels natural. We share a bunch of language in the scenarios, but most likely it's not how you'd prefer to say it. Like, why people say, well, gosh, that doesn't sound like me. That doesn't sound right. That sounds this or that. The point of this is for you to take these recommendations and then make them your own language. A great way to do that is to record yourself saying it 5 times. And you'll start changing it up as you say it each time. And by the 5th time, it'll be more your language. That's a great way for you to kind of take what we're sharing today and make it your own. And as we talked about in our first section on permission-based asking, be ready to ask permission to ask more questions and be ready to respond in an honoring way if the answer is no or not now. All right, so let's jump into some scenarios. I'm sure you all have had this before. The first one is, let's see. The first is around the discovery phase with the donor, where you're learning if the donor wants a deeper relationship with your organization and what their passions and interests might be. So at Veritus, major gifts, we qualify donors to be on a major gift caseload or portfolio. We don't have donors on there that don't talk back to us. So qualifying means they meet the metric, but they also want a two-way relationship.
And this is so important. And I think this is why I absolutely love the Veritus way, because it's clear that Veritus kind of forces us to make sure that we have relationships with people that want to have relationships with us. You can find yourself, and again, particularly if you work at a smaller shop or a mid-sized shop, do a lot of what I've went through a lot in my career, what I call chicken chasing, right? You're running around trying to chase donors and you're trying to interact with these people that clearly express that they're just not interested, right? And it becomes more of a sales thing. But when the Veritas way talks about a qualified portfolio, again, those are individuals that clearly indicate that they do want to have a relationship. And also with that increases your chances in increasing giving with these donors too as well, because it says that they can be engaged in the other areas of work that your organization is really doing, right? So you want to spend your time almost with individuals with the best return on investment. Again, we don't want to look at them like they are stocks, but your time is valuable, right? Particularly as a major gifts person, you're probably spending a lot of time at events and doing other things. So you want to make sure that you're just spending time with donors that are truly engaged with the organization and the work that's happening.
So as you're preparing to make calls, Jarrod, to folks you're qualifying, what sort of questions do you prepare, and how do you? I mean, these are cold calls, we call them, really. I mean, you maybe sent a letter ahead of time. Hey, I'm your person. I'm around. But talk a little bit about how you prepare and what you might say and do in those calls.
Well, to start, you may have an advantage if you are in an organization that previously has not really done a lot of major gifts work. You will be surprised how pleasant donors will come off by saying, I've been given to this organization for 10 years, and this is the first time someone's contacting me. I've gotten a lot of feedback about that, right? Because again, when you work in smaller organizations, it's just difficult for people to find the time to interact with donors. So believe it or not, people will probably be pleasantly happy to hear from you. So be positive on that front. And when I do, I just be honest and transparent, is that I just want to tell you what our organization has been up to. I would love just to get to know you better and just let you know some of the great things that we're doing. I want to introduce myself and just start from there, generally. And that's a thank you. And that truly is a thank you. Again, you've got individuals that's been given to organizations for years and unfortunately has not had the opportunity to really engage with anybody. So starting off there can really go a long way. And from that conversation, you should be extracting data and extracting information from donors, right? So you can be able to continue to cultivate them throughout the process. Again, you will be pleasantly surprised, particularly if you follow the cadence of the Veritas way, about sending letters, phone calls, things like that. It becomes second nature to you, and it becomes a rhythm. And after a while, you'll be qualifying donors, which is exciting because that lets you know that you're actually moving forward in the process. It makes a difference.
I love how you start out the conversation. I mean, clearly from the very beginning, you're not here to ask me for money, so I don't have to hang up on you or say no. You're clear about what the conversation was about, and it makes it more of an open invitation to have a quick conversation than typically can happen calling donors. So quickly before we move on, Jarrod, what about donors that are don't want to talk to you? They don't want to have a conversation, and they're like, no thanks, not interested. How do you deal with that emotionally? Because you're making these phone calls, you're making these connections, and how do you think about it?
Yeah, I think that, again, because of the Veritus way, we don't necessarily want to have conversation with individuals that is not considered qualified, that don't really want to engage, but there's other ways that they can stay engaged too as well. Those individuals can kind of fall more in what they call that mid-level giving area. Right. So they still can receive, indirect, direct mail pieces, electronic communications, things that kind of keep them still actively involved with the organization. You have to remember they made a gift at some point, right? No matter how long ago it was. So it was some level of interest, whether it was another individual that got them involved, they heard something, they seen something. It was some type of level of interest and passion there. So you want to be able to still keep that intact while the donor probably necessarily doesn't want to engage at the level that you want to. There's still probably some type of level of interest and passion there. So making sure you're organizing that throughout the process, I think is important. Just always knowing that there's still ways. But you got to believe there are many, 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 many donors in your database right now that is living, breathing, that can be transformational to your organization. So you have to be pavement, and Veritas way definitely helps you do that. Mm-hmm.
I love it. Yes, because it's in that relationship, that authenticity, that spending time, feeling the difference they're making, all that follow up, that you're discovering folks that really have a high passion and potential. Yeah, thank you. All right, the next one. I've had this definitely happen, is all about when the donor may be ready to give or came to the meeting with a check in hand, and maybe you weren't anticipating that.
That has happened to me a lot. And particularly, I think what happens is that you can develop, if you're a high performing major guest officer, you can develop a reputation that everyone kind of knows, what you're here for, and things like that. So I was heading into my third year with my organization, and they say that's kind of the typical kind of track of a major guest person. Year one, you're introducing yourself. Year two, you can make a difference, and then year three should be a high performing year, right? That's kind of like that 3 year track of performance typically. And I was in my third year, and there was a couple that I just loved to death. They enjoyed me. They were so engaged in things we were doing, and I knew that they had a much higher capacity than what they were currently giving, right? So I had a clue to tell me as to why I should really look to upgrade them to a major gift, right? That was just going to be transformational for our organization. So I asked them out to lunch, and we're there, and I'm going through the Veritas way, opening the questions. But at this point, I had already knew a lot of this, right? So we're talking about her cat and her sons and just everything else. And we get to the point where it's time for me to make the, and right when I'm getting ready to put it on the table, she pulls out her checkbook and she hands me a check. And it was a lot less than what I was going to ask for. So that happens quite a bit. That happens often. So best practice and best case is still to be appreciative, still be thankful, but going back to the point of carving out next steps, right? And still positioning yourself for something else. You can make you can ask a question of, well, thank you for this, but I was gonna, engage you in a different program that we had. Or, moving forward in the future, can we have a different conversation about this? All still centered and based around being permission based. So you constantly have to kind of find ways, no matter what happens, no matter what position that you're in, there's a still permission based posture. Again, it promotes safety and it still allows you to move a donor forward. But yes, I've had quite a bit of this happen to me in my career.
I remember that happened to me as well. I think it'd be interesting too. One thing we can do is when we are getting ready to ask for a gift, it's great to let donors we're getting ready to ask for a gift. Like they know that this meeting is about asking for a gift. And we can even indicate, hey, I would love to meet with you, and I've got some big, bold ideas of things I would love to share with you. So you can also give a little like, hey, heads up, I'm going to be asking for more, and there's some big ideas. And they may still come with the check, and that's great. But then you could say, this is so exciting. Thank you for your generosity. Would you still like to hear about some of the big, bold ideas, once you've had some conversations, thanking them for their big gift, their gift they're giving in the moment? So, and if you know the donor really well, you can crack jokes about it.
Yeah.
But typically, I think it's so important to be in the moment with folks and pause and really be present to their generosity. And then if you've indicated there's some big, bold things, it might be a way to ask about next steps or if they're interested in more conversation.
Yeah.
Cool.
And I think always us being in a space of gratitude,
Mm-hmm.
no matter kind of what that is, and really understanding how great, the needs really are. I think that many of us can almost do a really better job of really kind of creating these scenarios of what will happen if a donor, does not make this gift, right? We don't want to make it like it's World War III, but at the same time, we want to make them feel valued and understand how valuable their giving really is to our organizations.
All right, next one. Got one more. Yeah, so we talked about this just a little bit. And, if a donor can't give for a year and something's going on, I think it's so important to figure out ways in which you can help them feel seen and cared about as a human. I know one story coming to mind for me, and then I want to hear, Jarrod, what ideas you have, is this fundraiser I was working with years ago wanted to meet with a donor and make an ask. And the donor's like, it was kind of cute. She was like, I have a new puppy, so I can't meet with you for 6 months. So the fundraiser, it was so cute. She sent a gift to the puppy, to the donor's house, with a note written to the puppy. And the donor was so touched. She wrote a thank you note back to the fundraiser from the puppy, inviting the fundraiser to come to her home and have more conversations. And so I think that's a great example of, hey, I'm going to meet you where you are and care about you as a human and honor who you are. And, let's journey in the relationship and keep offering opportunities. And I think sometimes we may err on the side of not asking enough or not asking when we should, because we're fearful around the timing. So what I love about the permission-based asking is we just ask if they're ready for that conversation, right? And that helps us get out of our heads and our guessing and our stories that we're making up, and really be in that relationship flow. Jarrod, what about you on this one?
Well, I really love that puppy story. I think it shows our human side, and I think a lot of times, unfortunately, when these situations happen, normally those reasons are because of that. There's normally something significant that's truly going on. I had a donor that I was excited to solicit, and unfortunately, she had a catastrophic incident in her home. And we think a roof almost kind of like caved in. And I mean, it was just something that was going to be some major repair. And it eventually, unfortunately, caused her a little bit of health issues too, as well. So when things like that occur, that's when you really have to really start to value the relationship, right? If it's truly about the person that or the donor that you're working with, now is the time to really kind of take the fundraiser hat off and really value someone for the things that they do with your organization, whether it's about, giving or not. Right. And it's a great way to connect too, as well. And I think we never stop doing that, right? We never stop being genuine and being authentic and some of the things that we do with our donors, handwritten cards, true, intimate phone calls, gifts. There's so many things that, you would do if you had a friendship or with your family that we do with our donors to make them really, really feel valued. Because we want to teach people the joy of giving, but we also too want to be able to give people joy as well too. So that has happened quite a bit. But I love that puppy story. That's a really good story.
I got one more story for you, Jarrod, that just came to mind that I love. That I'm thinking we heard on one of these webinars or something. This fundraiser was in the younger group and didn't know what AAA tick trips were from AAA. They gave you their little flip over maps. This is before we had all this wonderful technology. And it was really exciting to get this map with a yellow highlighted, the road you're supposed to be on, and you could flip it while you're driving and not run off the road trying to look at a map. It was very high technology, you all. She didn't know what it was. Her donor was going on a trip. He loved those. He was talking about it. So she looked it up. She found that she can still order them online for his trip. She ordered them online for his trip. And then all along the way, he's sending her pictures and notes about his experience. I mean, to me, that was just like fun creativity. And people love that sort of thinking outside the box in ways to see them as a human.
Yeah. I think one of the things that I love about our profession is that when we really, really have authentic relationships, how much we can grow as people from them too, as well. I think throughout the years, I'm just so grateful that, some of the things that donors have shared with me and has really built into me personally and grown me personally. I just will always have such a high appreciation for it. And again, when we're building authentic relationships with people, that's the way that they should feel. We really are privileged to do the work that we do, not only for the organizations that we're a part of, but working with people that truly understand the spirit of giving, right? And again, they give in different ways, they give in different ways, and it can personally be they're very powerful for us. So I hope that we just never take those moments for granted.
Thank you. And lastly, we're going to go to the last slide before we have you all do some fun things together. Yeah, if you're coming in to talk with a donor and you're not quite sure how much to ask, it's great to bring sort of a menu of options at different price points. And that can be a great way to have a conversation and kind of see where they are and get a feel for what might make sense. And they might surprise you. And put some big, bold ideas on there too, if you think they have capacity. All right. So a few things to keep in mind. I know we've given you a lot of information today. So here are a few final things to keep in mind. Leave with permission for the next step. So always be thinking about a next step that will help you continue the journey of the relationship, whether that be a follow-up touch point that you want to hear their feedback on, something that's interactive. Be prepared to pivot, like you're listening, you're tuning in, you're feeling their rhythm where they are. So be prepared to pivot in the direction that's really going to be where the donor is. Practice so it feels natural, and keep the focus on the long-term relationship. All right.
Awesome. Well, thank you both so much for all of this great content and all of the ideas. I've seen some wonderful comments in the chat from everybody, and we're going to move into just some questions time and try to get some more ideas and information for you all. So if you have a question, please do put that in the Q&A box. I've got several in there, but if you have another one, go ahead and pop that in there so we can try to get to as many as possible. So we did have one question that I would love for both of you to share just about language for prospects who have maybe lapsed. So I know we talked about a donor where you go into the meeting, they're like, well, I'm not going to be able to give as much this year, but maybe that donor hasn't given for a year or two. You're trying to check in with them. You're able to get a meeting. What's some language you can use to maybe address that or talk about that and check in with that donor?
Rod, go first.
Well, I think you can do a little research to try to figure out exactly why the donor stopped giving. It may be something that occurred in some type of process that didn't allow the donor to stop giving. Is it something, that you're not happy with that we're doing in the organization? Do you feel like you're not getting enough information about our work? Is there any more information I can share with you to inspire you to give again? So I think that's a general language as to trying to figure out exactly why did the donor stop giving? Because there's normally a story behind that. And particularly when you're doing a lot of qualification work, you will hear that a lot. People will quickly tell you either, unfortunately, some bad experiences that they've had with the organization or any type of historical things that I think that's going to be important for you to know. So I think understanding the why first is a good start.
Yeah, I would add that it's an opportunity because you can educate them about who you are and your role and how you're going to be relating to them, which is different than they've probably ever experienced, right? With the Veritus approach, it's much more connecting and permission based, and you're going on a journey. So it can be like, I'm here to really follow up and learn about your passions and interests, and I would love to have re-engage and have you be a part. Tell me more about your journey with the organization and start unpacking, some of that loss in those years.
Absolutely. Those are great ideas. So we also had a question. I know we talked about this a little bit already, but a question from Emily of could we talk a little bit more about how to help people feel comfortable sharing instead of feeling like the questions are invasive?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's it's really interesting. I think about if I'm nervous and uncomfortable, then I'm probably going to I'm probably going to cause, because we sort of read off each other's body language, right? Because like 80% of what we communicate is body language. So I think number one, start working on yourself and tools to get present and coming from a really open, loving heart and asking permission to ask questions, I think helps with a lot of that. And then if you're moving into asking some questions about, let's say, their interest in the mission, and you feel like if someone just says, I just think you all are great, I've always liked you, it's great to have deeper questions to come back with. If a person really seems uncomfortable and they're not ready to share, that's okay. This is not like you have to dig and get everything in one meeting, right? They may need some more trust before they even want to tell you anything about their passion for your organization. So I think reading where they are and allowing space for that.
And I think too, also giving people space to talk about themselves a little bit and learn about them personally. I think that gives them an opportunity to be reflective about some of their own things that they've done in their own personal lives, right? So you kind of can create a somber kind of pace, I think, when you can begin a conversation just like that, just getting to know somebody, right? And just allowing them to reflect on their own kind of personal lives. I think that kind of disarms people, right? And then from there, you can be able to kind of start to ask questions about your organization.
Absolutely. And I know we just heard a really great story from one of our clients about the fundraiser. It was like National Bring Your Kid to Work Day. So she brought her daughter to work and sent a picture out to a couple of donors that it felt appropriate to send that touch point out to. And it actually kickstarted this wonderful conversation with several of her donors where they were sharing about their kids and like what they do for work. And it was just a really nice way to bring a little bit of her own vulnerability and personal life into it. And then it inspired others to feel comfortable sharing as well.
Yeah, sharing a bit about your passion and reason for being there really does help do that, Rebecca. That's a great point.
Mm-hmm. So we also had a question from Sandy about virtual meetings with donors, which, we all know don't have quite the same experience of being able to read people's body languages as you get in person. So she's asking kind of specifically about, do you share a screen? Do you try to just keep it faces? How do you try to create some of this engagement and space when you're in a virtual meeting setting?
Well, I think some of the fundamentals that we talked about today, I think still are true. You want to ask permission-based questions. I think you want to try to always kind of carve out next steps. I think that you want to be clear about things. So I think all of those is going to apply whether that's in person or rather virtually too. And then there is advantage being virtual too, because that may kind of help the donor and help yourself be a little bit more settled because it's just not exactly kind of in person. So it can be used to your advantage. But I think a lot of things that we talked about today would apply for a virtual meeting.
Yeah, I think you were saying it's a little harder to read people's language. I know it is on Zoom than in person. So having some open-ended questions to ask, like, how is this information hitting you? Is this interesting to you? And they may be very interesting and they're just processing and they're really interested, but they're kind of seeming quiet. So being able to just ask permission, would you like to hear more about this? Or would you like to go in a different direction right now? So having open-ended questions that help you check in where the person is can help with that Zoom. I would do video if anytime I can, because at least you have the visual to help you.
Great. Thank you both. So we had a question from Christine talking about the fact that for them, they've had a lot of turnover, which is not uncommon. A lot of organizations experience a lot of turnover. And with that, you can have a lot of attrition with those donor relationships, either just the quality of the relationship or the actual giving. So, if you're bringing somebody in new and there's been a lot of turnover before that person, is there any language that you would recommend for how to have a conversation with that donor and try to reconnect them?
Always a tough one. That's been the story of my career. But that's always a pretty challenging question. I think this is where you really have to insert yourself by being an authentic professional, right? I think, admit to the turnover, make it clear, say that, because that is a reality. We focus on what can be different next time. And most importantly, getting the donor to focus on the mission of the organization still too, as well. Is that, well, we know relationships are extremely important for raising dollars. We always want to make sure that donors are just truly engaged in our mission and not necessarily people that support and work for the mission.
That's good.
That is good. Anything you want to add, Karen?
I think, just saying, I'm sure that I know donors who've had these, they're so tired of conversation after conversation with fundraisers from the same organization. Be like, this must be irritating for you to have these continued conversations. And I'm really sorry. Just apologize for it. And this, like what Jarrod said, this is what I'm going to do differently. I'm here to really understand your interests and passions. I want to make sure that we are following up and giving you the impact and sharing about the impact you're making. And this is what my plan is. And I hope that you'll give me an opportunity to gain your trust. And then they can choose not to or do so, really, but to lay it out authentically is helpful.
Wonderful. Well, thank you both. I know we didn't get to quite all of the questions, but if you still have a question and you want us to answer it, you can feel free to send us an email. Thank you all so much for being with us today and for participating so actively. As a reminder, we're going to send a recording of this webinar along with the slide deck in an email tomorrow, so be on the lookout for that. And if you need anything else, have any questions, you can email us at hello@veritusgroup.com. And then Caitlin, if you'll switch to the next slide, we just wanted to also offer everyone here a discount code. If you are interested in taking any of our courses to learn the Veritus way and learn how to do this in your organization, this is a special discount code that's higher than what's available on our website. You can just scan the QR code to get that. And then this will also be included in your follow-up emails if you are interested. With that, I'll just say thank you so much again, and we look forward to hopefully seeing you on a future webinar or in a course. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you all for joining us.